The alien queen's own guards fled, but the human soldier shielded her with his body. Streets were clean and empty, as most Velith citizens worked inside enormous buildings. Today, however, the city was alive with excitement. A special event was about to take place in the Grand Palace at the center of the city. Queen Alara, the ruler of the Velith Empire, would speak to representatives of other worlds. Inside the palace, the air was cool and smelled faintly of polished metal and flowers imported from distant planets. The hall was massive. It could hold thousands, but only a few hundred were present for the ceremony. Alien leaders of many species sat in rows, their eyes bright with curiosity or suspicion. Some whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music, others in rough, clipped tones. The queen's own guards, elite warriors who wore shining armor, stood in perfect formation around the room. They carried energy weapons that glowed softly. They were supposed to be the best the Empire had, the most loyal, the strongest. The queen herself entered the hall. Her skin shimmered with a soft blue light, her hair like liquid silver falling to her waist. She wore a robe that glowed faintly, woven from the finest fabrics in the Empire. She walked slowly, deliberately, her eyes scanning the crowd with calm authority. She smiled slightly, though the tension was there in her shoulders. Among the guests was a human soldier named Ethan Brooks. Ethan was not supposed to be in the front lines. He was part of a small security liaison team sent to observe and advise on human-alien relations. Humans were few in number in this palace and in the Empire. Most aliens looked at humans with curiosity or mild amusement. Ethan's uniform was simple compared to the Velith armor, and his weapon was a compact rifle, nothing compared to the alien energy blasters around him. Yet Ethan felt calm. He had trained for years for situations he could not always control, and today he had a strange feeling that he might be needed. The ceremony began. Queen Alara spoke softly, her voice clear and melodic, echoing slightly in the vast hall. She spoke of peace, of cooperation, and of understanding between the species. She promised trade agreements, shared technology, and a mutual defense pact. Alien leaders nodded or whispered approval. It was a moment meant to strengthen the Empire and show its power through diplomacy. Then, without warning, the sound came. First, a low hum, almost like the air itself, was vibrating. Then a sharp explosion shook the hall, sending dust and pieces of ceiling plaster into the air. The lights flickered and a red alarm light began to flash. Screaming started, chaotic and loud. The alien guards snapped to action, but not in the way the queen expected. The attackers came through the walls as if the walls were not there. Strange weapons fired bolts of energy that passed through the palace shields as if they were nothing. The Velith warriors raised their weapons, but their armor systems began to fail. The protective fields around them flickered and died. Fear spread quickly in their eyes. Some turned to run, others tried to protect the queen, but the moment of panic had taken them. Queen Alara froze. She had faced wars, rebellions, and assassins before. She had trained her life to survive and command under pressure. But she had never seen her elite guards flee in such a sudden, total way. One by one, they retreated. Some shouted orders to each other, others simply ran, leaving her standing alone. The Grand Palace, a symbol of her power, suddenly felt like a cage of glass with nothing to protect her. Ethan saw it first. He noticed the hesitation in the queen's eyes, the shock as her guards ran. Something inside him clicked. He could not explain why, but he knew he could not let her be left alone. He moved quickly, stepping forward, raising his body in front of her. Alien bolts of energy arced through the hall, striking where she had been standing just moments before. Dust flew around them and heat filled the air. Ethan held his ground. "Stay low," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've got you." The queen's eyes widened. She had never seen a human act like this. Humans were small, fragile compared to Velith warriors, and yet here was one of them putting himself between her and death. She wanted to protest, to tell him to move, but she realized she had no choice. She crouched slightly, her glowing robe brushing the floor, trusting a species she barely knew. The hall became chaos. Alien diplomats tried to run, some screaming at the attackers, others trying to escape through side corridors. Explosions shook the walls and ceiling. Debris fell and the smell of burning metal filled the air. Ethan adjusted his stance, keeping his body low and moving slightly to shield her from stray energy blasts. Every second felt like an hour, every heartbeat a warning. He could see his own injuries forming, small cuts from flying debris, bruises forming from the force of the blasts. But he ignored them. One of the attackers got too close, an alien warrior from a species known for their speed and sharp claws. Ethan pushed the queen behind a fallen column, then confronted the attacker. Using quick reflexes and human ingenuity, he managed to knock the alien off balance. It was not a fight he could win, but it was enough to delay them. The queen watched, astonished. She had commanded fleets and armies, and yet she had never seen courage like this. "Move," Ethan said, grabbing her arm. "I'll cover you." The queen nodded, finally finding her voice. "Ethan, why?" "Because it's right," he said simply. They moved together, ducking behind fallen pillars, sliding under broken railings, and weaving through the chaos of the palace. The queen noticed the humans in her mind. So small, so unassuming, yet so determined. She realized that the stories she had heard of human bravery were true, but seeing it in action was different. It had a weight, a presence, a kind of stubborn light that even advanced alien technology could not match. The attackers were everywhere, but Ethan kept his focus. He was not thinking of glory or reward. He only thought of keeping the queen alive. Every step was calculated. He used the walls for cover, his eyes scanning for threats. He carried a small sidearm for emergencies, but mostly he relied on speed, instinct, and courage. The queen marveled silently at his skill, a strange pride and relief rising inside her. Outside the hall, the palace corridors were collapsing. Ceiling panels fell like rain, and sparks from damaged energy conduits lit the paths. The queen stumbled once, and Ethan caught her without hesitation. She felt the strength of a human, not just physical but of will. Even when his own body was hit by falling debris, he continued. She realized that the loyalty and bravery of humans could not be measured by numbers or armor. It was something deeper, something built into them. The first hour felt endless. The palace, designed to intimidate and awe, was now a maze of danger and fear. They moved quickly but carefully. Ethan found routes that alien guards would have missed, shortcuts through maintenance tunnels and collapsed stairwells. The queen followed him, silent except for her occasional whispered questions about his species. Ethan answered simply, calmly. He did not try to impress her with technical talk or politics. He only guided her. Finally, they reached a doorway leading to the outside, where smoke and fire mixed with the pale light of the suns. The city was under attack, and the queen realized she had survived only because a human had chosen to act when her own elite warriors had failed. She looked at Ethan, her eyes wide. "You saved me," she said. He shook his head slightly, smiling faintly despite the blood and sweat on his face. "I only did what needed to be done." And in that moment, Queen Alara began to understand something important. Humans were small, fragile, and often underestimated. But they had courage, loyalty, and determination that no technology, no armor, and no training could guarantee. A single human could stand when an entire empire's warriors fled. A single human could make a difference. The first battle was not over, but a seed had been planted. Across the galaxy, the stories of bravery and loyalty would grow, and Queen Alara would remember this human soldier not as a minor guest, but as a shield, as a protector, as someone who had changed the way she thought about life, loyalty, and courage. Ethan and Queen Alara moved into the shadows of the city, ready to survive another hour, another attack. The palace behind them burned, but the spark of human bravery had lit a fire that could not be destroyed. Part 2, a human choice. The streets of Velethin were no longer calm rivers of silver. Smoke and dust rose from buildings, some still burning from explosions. Alien civilians ran in every direction, many screaming, some frozen with fear. Vehicles designed for speed and elegance lay overturned, twisted by blasts. Ethan Brooks held Queen Alara close, guiding her through the chaos. The pale suns above were partially blocked by smoke, casting long, shifting shadows on the streets. Ethan moved carefully, keeping the queen behind him. Every step was cautious but urgent. He had trained for emergencies like this, but the reality was harsher than anything he had imagined. The air was thick with heat and dust, and occasional fire bursts from broken conduits made sparks rain down like deadly showers. He winced as a small piece of debris cut his arm, but he did not slow. Queen Alara noticed his injuries and frowned. "Ethan," she whispered, "you are hurt." "I'm fine," he replied. His voice was calm, but his muscles tensed as another explosion shook a nearby building. "We need to keep moving. If we stop, they will catch us." The queen realized something that she had never understood before. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest, but they had a kind of stubborn will. They could endure pain, fear, and uncertainty and keep going. Her own species had trained soldiers who could fight with incredible skill, but many of them ran when the unexpected happened. Ethan, a human, ran not from fear, but toward what needed to be done. They turned into a narrow alleyway, one of the few paths not blocked by debris. Alien attackers were everywhere. Some flew above in small, hovering craft, shooting energy bolts at anything that moved. Others were on the ground, running swiftly on legs that could jump great distances. Ethan pushed the queen against a wall and scanned the street ahead. He noticed shadows moving, shapes of aliens preparing to ambush anyone trying to flee. "We have to move now," he said. "Follow me and stay low." Queen Alara nodded and crouched behind him. Ethan led her down the alley, ducking under broken signs and jumping over rubble. The sounds of the city under attack surrounded them. Screams, explosions, the crackle of energy weapons. Yet Ethan's calm focus seemed to cut through the chaos. He was not thinking of glory, only survival and protecting the queen. Suddenly, an attacker appeared at the end of the alley. It was a fast, reptilian species known for their sharp claws and agility. It moved like lightning, aiming directly for them. Ethan reacted instantly. He grabbed the queen and rolled to the side, using his own body to block the strike. The attacker's claws grazed his shoulder, tearing his jacket and cutting his skin. Pain shot through his arm, but he pushed through it. With quick reflexes, he knocked the alien back using the momentum of his body. Queen Alara stared at him, astonished. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the noise of the battle. "Because no one else will," Ethan replied, "and because it's right." She realized then that human courage was not just about fighting, it was about choice. Every other guard had fled because their training taught them to survive. Ethan acted because he chose to. He could have run, but he did not. He could have saved himself, but he did not. He chose to protect her, and that choice mattered more than any weapon or armor. They continued through the city, taking side streets and back alleys to avoid the main attacks. Buildings crumbled around them. Walls that once looked solid now had holes blasted through them. Fire licked at the edges of streets, and the smell of smoke and burning metal filled the air. Civilians ran past them, some looking at Ethan in shock. One young alien child clutched a parent's hand and whispered, "He is human, and he fights like a hero." Ethan did not look at them. He focused on the path ahead. He saw a collapsed bridge that could block their escape and a group of attackers moving toward it. Thinking quickly, he grabbed a metal beam from the rubble and swung it, knocking two attackers off balance. It was not enough to stop them completely, but it delayed them. Every second counted, and every small action could save lives. Queen Alara followed closely, her robe smudged with dust and ash. She tried to match Ethan's pace, but she was not built for running through ruined streets. Ethan noticed and slowed slightly, supporting her when she stumbled. "We are almost there," he said. "Keep moving." They reached a plaza that had once been a place of beauty. Fountains now lay in ruins, water boiling from damage, statues cracked and broken. Alien attackers were everywhere, some flying above, others running swiftly on the ground. Ethan ducked behind a fallen statue and peeked around. He saw a narrow tunnel that led toward the outskirts of the city. It was risky, but it was their best chance. "This way," he said, grabbing the queen's hand. She hesitated for a moment, looking back at the burning city. "I will not leave you," he said firmly. She nodded, trusting him completely now. They ran toward the tunnel. The air grew cooler as they entered, but the darkness was almost complete. Ethan led carefully, using his rifle to illuminate the path. The tunnel was narrow and the walls were rough, but it was safe from most of the attackers. They could hear the distant chaos above them, but here they could breathe. As they moved through the tunnel, Ethan's wounds began to hurt more. Blood had soaked through his sleeve, but he ignored it. The queen noticed and frowned. "You will not survive if you keep going like this," she said. "I will survive," he replied simply. "Just keep following me." The tunnel led them outside the city walls. The landscape beyond was rough desert, but it was open, and there were fewer attackers here. They emerged under the light of the suns, and for a moment they could see the destruction behind them. The city, once a symbol of strength and order, was now chaos and ruin. Alien ships hovered above, some firing at remaining targets, some scouting for survivors. Ethan led the queen across the open desert, staying low to avoid being seen. He knew the attackers would not expect them to take this path. His human instincts guided him, rather than maps or alien intelligence. He noticed small hills and depressions in the sand, perfect for cover. He moved with careful precision, keeping the queen close to him. They stopped briefly behind a large rock. Ethan crouched, breathing heavily. His injuries were serious, but he would not stop. The queen looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and admiration. "You are remarkable," she said softly. "I do not feel remarkable," he replied. "I just do what I must." She realized then that humans could act without expectation of reward or recognition. They acted out of loyalty, morality, or instinct. It was a kind of bravery that did not rely on status, training, or fear of shame. It was pure choice. They continued across the desert. The suns were hot, but the open space allowed them to see attackers from a distance. Ethan used every skill he had learned to avoid detection, moving quickly, hiding in depressions, and using the terrain to his advantage. The queen, despite her alien physiology, struggled in the heat and the rough terrain, but Ethan supported her every step. As night approached, the desert grew cooler. The sky was streaked with colors from the setting suns. Ethan and the queen found shelter in a small cave. It was not comfortable, but it was safe for the moment. Ethan tended to his wounds as best as he could, using supplies from his small pack. The queen watched silently, realizing that this human had no obligation to do any of this, yet he had risked everything for her. "Why humans?" she asked finally. "Why do you act like this for someone you barely know?" "Because life matters," he said simply. "Because it is right to protect others when you can, because running away is easy but standing for someone else, that is harder." The queen nodded slowly. She understood in a way she had never understood before. Humans were fragile, yes, but they had a strength that came from choice, from conscience, from will. A single human could stand when many fled. A single human could change the course of events. They rested briefly in the cave, but they both knew they could not stay long. Attackers would search the area, and the desert offered little permanent protection. Ethan planned their next move carefully, studying the horizon and noting possible routes to safety. He would not fail, he could not. The queen's life depended on him, and he had already made a promise in action, if not in words. As the suns disappeared below the horizon, Ethan looked at the queen. "We will make it," he said. "I will not let them take you." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I believe you," she said, and in that moment the bond was formed, not one of orders or loyalty to a crown, but of trust, courage, and the simple human choice to stand when others ran. In the quiet of the desert, with the city burning far behind them, Ethan and Queen Alara prepared to face whatever came next. Together, Part 3. Escape through ruin. The desert stretched endlessly before Ethan Brooks and Queen Alara. The pale light of the twin moons reflected off the sand, casting long shadows. The city of Velethan, now burning in the distance, seemed like a memory already fading into smoke and dust. Yet the danger was far from over. Alien attackers who had survived the initial strike would search the surrounding area, and every moment spent in open space was a risk. Ethan led the queen carefully, staying low, using every hill and dune as cover. His arm was still bleeding and his muscles ached, but he ignored the pain. Stopping now could mean death. He had to keep moving. He scanned the horizon constantly, alert for any movement, any shadow that did not belong. The queen followed closely, her glowing robe now dirty and torn, her usual calm composure shaken by exhaustion and fear. "How much farther?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the whisper of the wind. "We need to reach the canyon," Ethan said. "There we can hide and rest. It is a safe distance from the city." They moved carefully, taking long, quiet steps. The desert was not empty. Strange creatures native to the planet scuttled between rocks, and the occasional flying predator circled high above. Ethan ignored them. His focus was on the human and alien attackers who might appear at any moment. The queen watched him, marveling at his calm determination. Humans, she realized, could act with courage even when surrounded by death. Suddenly, a bright flash lit the desert. A group of alien scouts had spotted them. They were fast, with multi-jointed legs and energy weapons that glowed with blue fire. Ethan immediately pushed the queen to the ground behind a dune. He raised his small rifle and fired, aiming carefully. The attackers stumbled as a few were hit, but more ran forward. Ethan knew he could not hold them forever. "We have to run," he whispered, helping the queen to her feet. They sprinted across the sand, feet sinking into the soft surface, dust rising around them. The attackers were fast, but Ethan had learned to use the terrain. He zigzagged through dunes, making it hard for them to aim accurately. The queen struggled to keep up, but Ethan kept supporting her. His body ached, his arm bleeding heavily, yet he refused to slow down. At one point, the queen stumbled on a hidden rock and fell. Ethan caught her immediately, shielding her with his body from the attacker's fire. One of the aliens struck his shoulder with a claw, tearing through his uniform and causing him to grunt in pain. He did not falter. He pushed the queen behind a larger dune, using it as cover. "We are close," he said, though his voice was strained. "Just a little further." The canyon appeared in the distance, dark and jagged against the desert horizon. It offered safety because the walls could block line of sight and attackers could not surround them easily. Ethan guided the queen toward it, moving quickly but carefully. The attackers were still pursuing, but the uneven terrain slowed them. Ethan used this to their advantage, hiding behind rocks, sliding down slopes, and finding small crevices for temporary safety. "I never thought humans could be like this," Queen Alara said during a brief pause. Her voice was soft, almost awestruck. "So small, yet so strong." "We survive because we have to," Ethan replied. "We endure because we care. It is not strength alone that matters." She nodded slowly, understanding in a way that could not be taught in a palace or classroom. She had known brave warriors before, but their courage was often based on orders, tradition, or fear of dishonor. Ethan's courage was different. It was choice, plain and simple. He could have fled, but he did not. He could have abandoned her, but he chose to protect her. That choice, she realized, was more powerful than any weapon or armor. As they entered the canyon, the light dimmed. The walls rose high, jagged and sharp, providing cover from the scouts still searching above. Ethan led the queen through narrow passages, careful not to make noise. The ground was uneven, full of loose stones and hidden holes, but he navigated it with precision. He stopped only briefly to tend to his wounds, using torn cloth from his uniform as bandages. The queen assisted him, though she was weak from exhaustion. They reached a small overhang, a safe place to rest for the moment. Ethan lay down, breathing heavily, while the queen sat beside him. She studied him closely, noting the cuts on his arms, the dirt smudges on his face, and the sweat on his forehead. Despite all this, he looked calm, almost serene. It was a calm born not from absence of danger, but from determination to protect. "Why do you risk everything for me?" she asked quietly. "Because someone has to," he replied. "Because if I do not, no one else might. Because it is the right thing to do." She thought about her own guards, those who had fled in the palace. They were trained, skilled, armed with the best equipment, yet they had abandoned her. Ethan had no obligation, no special duty, yet he had stood when others ran. She realized that bravery was not about training or power. It was about the choices one made when fear was strongest. The night was quiet for a time, the only sounds the distant cries of creatures and the whispering wind through the canyon. Ethan checked the queen's condition. She was tired, hungry, and bruised, but alive. He had been wounded more seriously than she realized. Blood stained his uniform, his breathing was heavy, and his movements were slower than usual, yet he refused to stop moving forward. "We need to keep going," he said. "We cannot stay here long. The attackers will search every canyon." The queen nodded. She trusted him completely now, not because of orders or obligation, but because of his actions. She had learned something important in the last few hours. Humans had a kind of courage that could not be measured by skill or numbers. It came from will, from choice, from the heart. As they moved deeper into the canyon, they encountered obstacles. Large boulders blocked the path, forcing them to climb carefully. Narrow ledges over drops required careful steps. Ethan went first, testing each foothold and handhold, making sure it could support both their weights. The queen followed, holding onto his hand, trusting him completely. At one point, a small group of alien scouts appeared at the entrance of the canyon, having followed their trail. Ethan saw them immediately and acted. He pushed the queen behind a rock and used his rifle to create a diversion. He fired in a way that drew the scouts' attention away from their path. Then he guided the queen silently along a side passage that the scouts had not noticed. They moved quickly and quietly, the queen barely daring to breathe. They found a small stream running through the canyon. The water was cold and clear, a welcome relief from the harsh desert outside. Ethan allowed the queen to drink and rest briefly. He drank sparingly, careful to ration their limited supply. The moonlight reflected on the water, casting silver patterns on the canyon walls. For a moment it felt almost peaceful, a quiet reprieve from the chaos. "You have saved me more than once," Queen Alara said, her voice soft. "I cannot repay you." "You do not need to," Ethan replied. "Just survive, that is enough." The queen realized that humans did not seek glory. They acted because it was right. Her empire, her guards, her armies, none had done what this one human had done. She felt a new respect for the human species, understanding that courage, loyalty, and determination were not always tied to strength or technology. They were tied to choice. They moved again, deeper into the canyon, taking advantage of its twists and turns. The attackers were still searching, but the canyon's natural complexity worked in their favor. Ethan led the queen through narrow passages, over fallen rocks, and around jagged cliffs. Each step required careful planning and trust. The queen relied completely on him, following his lead without hesitation. As dawn approached, the first light of the suns touched the canyon walls. Ethan and the queen reached a small plateau overlooking a wide valley. From here, they could see for miles. The city of Velethan was still burning in the distance, smoke rising into the sky. The attackers were not visible from here, giving them a momentary sense of safety. Ethan looked at the queen. "We have made it this far," he said, "but we are not safe yet. We need to keep moving, find friendly forces or a safe place to hide." Queen Alara nodded. She understood now that her life, her empire, and perhaps even the future of human-alien relations depended on this human soldier. Ethan had risked everything to protect her, and she could never forget it. "You are remarkable," she said again softly. "I only do what is right," he replied, and in that moment the queen knew that the story of their escape would not just be about survival. It would be about courage, loyalty, and the simple human choice to stand when others fled. Ethan Brooks, a single human soldier, had shown her what bravery truly meant. They settled briefly on the plateau, catching their breath and planning the next stage of their journey. The canyon had kept them alive, but the desert beyond would be another test. Yet for the first time since the attack, the queen felt hope. With Ethan by her side, she believed they could survive, and perhaps even turn the tide against those who sought to destroy her empire. And so, with the first light of day, Ethan and Queen Alara prepared to continue their journey. Every step forward was a choice, every moment a test of courage. But together they moved as one, determined to survive, and to prove that a single human could make a difference when it mattered most. Part 4. The Galaxy Watches. After days of moving through the desert and canyon, Ethan Brooks and Queen Alara finally found a small outpost hidden among rocky hills. The outpost belonged to a neutral alien faction that often provided shelter for travelers and messengers. Its walls were modest, built from local stone and reinforced with light energy shields. It was quiet and peaceful compared to the chaos of Velethan. Ethan led the queen inside carefully, making sure no one had followed them. Inside, they were greeted by a small group of aliens who looked at them with surprise. The queen's glowing presence and the human's bloodied uniform drew immediate attention. Ethan explained briefly that they had escaped an attack and needed safety. The aliens nodded and offered food, water, and basic medical supplies. Ethan tended to his wounds as best he could, and the queen received care for minor cuts and bruises. "You have done more than you know," one of the alien leaders said quietly. "Your actions may change the galaxy." Queen Alara looked at Ethan. She felt pride, concern, and gratitude all at once. She realized that his courage had already begun to send ripples beyond their immediate survival. The story of a single human soldier protecting her while her own elite guards fled would spread quickly. Other species would hear it, and the galaxy would begin to see humans in a new light. Ethan rested, exhausted. The weeks of constant movement, fighting, and carrying the queen had taken a toll on his body. His uniform was torn and stained, his muscles ached, and his wounds burned when he moved. Yet he did not complain. He focused on the queen's safety, and when she asked him to rest, he merely nodded and closed his eyes, letting her guards in the outpost provide temporary protection. "Ethan," Queen Alara said softly as she sat beside him, "the galaxy will hear about this. They will see what you did." "I do not care about that," he said. "I only care that you are safe, that is enough." She smiled faintly, understanding. Humans did not act for recognition. They acted because it was right, because loyalty and courage mattered more than status or glory. She had seen this firsthand, and it had changed her perception of the human species. Meanwhile, word of their escape began to spread faster than Ethan and the Queen realized. Scouts, survivors, and even automated surveillance drones recorded fragments of their flight from Velethan. Alien news networks picked up the story. A human soldier had shielded the Queen when her elite guards fled. Clips circulated showing Ethan defending her, dodging attacks, and guiding her through the desert. The footage went viral among alien worlds. Discussions and debates erupted. How could a human, considered small and weak, stand when trained alien warriors ran? Many alien leaders felt shame. Their soldiers had abandoned the Queen, their training had failed under pressure, and their fear had cost them credibility. Others felt fear. If humans could act with courage, loyalty, and intelligence on their own, how would they behave when deployed as allies or adversaries? Their unpredictability was now a powerful unknown factor. In the outpost, Queen Alara received communication from her empire. She refused to return immediately, citing the danger and her need to understand the humans' role in the events. She spoke publicly via secure channels, praising Ethan Brooks as a hero, describing his courage and the selfless actions that saved her life. Her voice, calm and authoritative, carried across the galaxy. "I honor this human," she said. "He stood when my guards fled. He protected life without hesitation. Let all species know that courage and loyalty are not bound by size, strength, or technology. Humanity has shown its value today." These words resonated throughout the galaxy. Soldiers, diplomats, and civilians alike reconsidered their assumptions about humans. Previously underestimated, humans were now seen as capable of extraordinary acts. Some feared their unpredictability, while others were inspired by it. Alliances shifted as species sought to understand and perhaps emulate human courage. Ethan and the Queen stayed in the outpost for several days, recovering and planning. Ethan's wounds healed slowly, but he refused to be idle. He trained quietly, observing the alien soldiers and learning their tactics, adapting them to his human skills. The Queen watched him, realizing that his strength was not just in his bravery, but in his intelligence and adaptability. He could think under pressure, improvise, and act decisively, all qualities her empire needed in allies. "Your actions have consequences far beyond what you know," she told him one evening as the sun set behind the hills. "You have changed how many worlds see humans. Your courage may prevent wars, save lives, and even reshape alliances." "I only did what I could," Ethan replied simply. "I do not plan to change the galaxy. I just protect when I can." But Queen Alara knew it was already changed. She could see it in the reports, in the reactions of alien leaders, and in the whispers of soldiers across the stars. Humans were no longer merely observers or minor participants in galactic affairs. One human soldier had proven that courage, choice, and loyalty mattered more than numbers, technology, or status. The galaxy had been warned. Humans could not be underestimated. As days passed, the Queen began to work on new plans. She reformed her personal guard doctrine, emphasizing loyalty, courage, and initiative, qualities she had seen in Ethan. She began to train her new guards alongside humans, seeking to understand how their instincts and choices could be combined with alien technology. She wanted the galaxy to learn that humans were allies who could be trusted, and that their bravery could be an example to others. Ethan, for his part, remained modest. He never sought recognition, medals, or titles. His reward was simple: the Queen's safety, the survival of the innocent, and the quiet knowledge that his actions mattered. Yet even without seeking it, recognition came. Reports of his deeds spread quickly, inspiring other humans and alien species alike. Children in distant worlds heard the story of a single human standing when everyone else fled. Soldiers whispered about his bravery in barracks across the galaxy. Diplomats cited his courage in meetings and treaties. One day, as Ethan and the Queen prepared to leave the outpost and continue towards safer regions, an alien ambassador approached. He was tall, with multiple eyes and a calm, serious demeanor. He bowed slightly before them. "Your courage is known across many systems," he said to Ethan. "Your actions have saved a queen and reminded the galaxy of the value of humans. I speak for many leaders when I say we are grateful and cautious in the best sense. Humans are no longer to be underestimated." Ethan nodded, quiet as always. He had no words to add. His actions had spoken for him. The queen watched him, understanding fully that this human had done more than fight enemies. He had shifted the perception of an entire species without even meaning to. She realized that his courage and loyalty were rare, precious traits that could inspire not only her empire but countless others across the galaxy. They left the outpost together, moving cautiously but with a renewed sense of purpose. The desert stretched ahead, but now it felt different. They were not just fleeing, they were part of something larger. Their journey symbolized the strength of human courage and the potential of trust between species. The attackers could come, but the galaxy had already seen the power of a single human choice. As they walked, Queen Alara reflected on the past days. Her empire had been shaken, her own guards had failed her, yet she had survived because of one human. She realized that alliances, wars, and diplomacy were fragile, but loyalty and courage could endure. Ethan Brooks embodied these traits. He was small, fragile by alien standards, yet stronger in ways that mattered most. Even as danger remained, the Queen felt hope. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but their choices could make a difference. She now understood why some civilizations feared humanity while others revered it. Courage like Ethan's could save empires, prevent destruction, and change perceptions. She had witnessed the impossible, a human shielding her when her own guards ran, standing firm while chaos surrounded them. And across the stars, the story spread. Across the galaxy, aliens whispered, debated, and watched. Humans were no longer just participants in galactic affairs. They were symbols of bravery, of loyalty, of the choice to act when others fled. One human soldier had reminded the galaxy that even small, fragile beings could stand tall when it mattered most. Queen Alara and Ethan continued their journey, the desert stretching endlessly ahead. The city of Velethan burned in the distance, but the fire of human courage had already reached far beyond it. They knew the journey was not over, but they moved with quiet confidence, aware that every step they took could inspire hope, fear, or respect across countless worlds. Ethan did not boast. He did not claim victory. He only walked side by side with the queen he had saved, ready for whatever challenges awaited. The galaxy watched, and the humans stood calm, determined, and unbroken. And in that moment, the queen understood fully. When everyone else runs, a human stands. Part 5. HFY Legacy. The journey across the desert and canyons had tested Ethan Brooks and Queen Alara in ways they had never imagined. Days of walking, running, and hiding had left them exhausted, injured, and hungry. Yet they continued, driven by necessity, courage, and trust in each other. Every step they took reminded the queen of one simple truth. Humans could stand when others fled, endure when others gave up, and act when others hesitated. They reached a small human settlement near the edge of the desert. It was a simple base, built for refugees and travelers. The walls were modest, the structures practical, but it offered shelter and safety. Ethan guided the queen inside carefully, making sure no one followed. The queen had been shielded and carried by a human for days, yet she arrived alive, unbroken, and surprisingly composed. Inside, humans moved efficiently, tending to injured travelers, preparing food, and maintaining defenses. They looked at Ethan with respect, seeing him not just as a soldier but as a hero. The queen observed quietly, noting how humans worked together, relied on each other, and valued every life, even in harsh conditions. She began to understand more about humanity, their strength, their resilience, their morality. "You have brought me safely," the queen said, her voice soft but firm. "And you did it without expectation. You have saved not just my life, but perhaps the trust between our peoples." "I only did what I could," Ethan replied simply. He was still injured, his body battered from days of constant movement, yet his resolve remained strong. "I do not seek reward or recognition. I protect when I can." The queen smiled, realizing that his humility made his courage even greater. She had known warriors who sought glory, medals, or titles. Ethan sought none of these. He acted out of choice, out of loyalty, and out of a sense of right and wrong. It was a kind of bravery that could not be measured by skill, technology, or status. It was pure and unshakable. As the queen recovered in the settlement, she began to share her story. She spoke to human leaders and diplomats, explaining the events in Velethan, the panic of her guards, and the unwavering courage of Ethan Brooks. Her words were calm, precise, and filled with authority. She praised Ethan publicly, describing his actions in detail, emphasizing that one human had stood when many others fled. The humans listened, astonished and proud. The story spread quickly, reaching colonies, stations, and settlements across human space. Soldiers, diplomats, and civilians alike were inspired by the account. The tale of Ethan Brooks became a symbol of human courage, loyalty, and the potential to make a difference even in the most desperate situations. Meanwhile, news of the human soldier who saved an alien queen spread across the galaxy. Alien governments, military leaders, and civilians alike learned of the events. Many were surprised. Humans had been underestimated for years. Some saw them as small, fragile, or reckless. Yet here was proof that humans could act decisively, courageously, and selflessly. Some alien leaders felt shame. Their own soldiers had fled, their tactics had failed, and their pride had been wounded by the actions of a single human. Others felt awe. If humans could act like this, without orders, without expectation, what could they do when fully mobilized, fully trusted, and fully engaged in interstellar affairs? Questions arose, debates began, and perceptions began to shift. Queen Alara took steps to ensure that the value of humans was recognized throughout her empire. She reformed her personal guard, introducing new training methods that emphasized loyalty, initiative, and moral courage, the very qualities she had seen in Ethan. She arranged for humans to train alongside her elite soldiers, learning from one another, sharing tactics, and building mutual trust. Her empire began to see humans not as minor participants or allies, but as partners whose courage and choice could change outcomes. Ethan recovered slowly, tending to his wounds with the help of human medics and alien healers. He refused praise, always redirecting attention to the queen or the lives that had been saved. Yet even without seeking recognition, accolades came. Ambassadors, soldiers, and leaders visited the settlement to meet the human who had stood alone when chaos reigned. He listened quietly, offering only modest words, but his actions spoke louder than any speech. One day, Queen Alara and Ethan stood on a high platform overlooking the settlement. The sun rose over the desert, casting long shadows and illuminating the scars of the journey they had survived together. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting admiration and gratitude. "Ethan," she said softly, "your courage has changed more than this battle. It has changed how humans are seen across the stars. It has reminded every species that courage is not measured by size, technology, or status. It is measured by choice." "I only protect when I can," he replied, shrugging lightly, yet his words carried weight. His actions had already proven their meaning. The queen smiled. She knew the galaxy would not forget. Stories of the human who shielded her would be told for years. Young soldiers and civilians alike would hear of a small human standing against overwhelming odds, choosing to protect life when all else ran. His bravery became a lesson, a symbol, a standard. Across distant worlds, alien leaders adjusted their policies and expectations. Humans were no longer underestimated. Alliances were reconsidered, defense strategies rethought, and respect earned not by numbers, but by the proven courage of one individual. The ripple effect of Ethan's actions spread far beyond the desert, far beyond Velithan. For Ethan, life returned slowly to a quiet rhythm. He trained with humans and alien allies, continued missions when needed, but he remained humble. He never sought fame, medals, or authority. His satisfaction came from knowing the queen was safe, that lives had been preserved, and that his choice had made a difference. Queen Alara often observed him, marveling at the simple humanity that had saved her life. She understood fully that humans were more than they appeared to other species. Their courage, loyalty, and moral choice could defy expectations and inspire hope across galaxies. She vowed to honor that truth in every treaty, every alliance, and every training program within her empire. Time passed, and the bond between Ethan and Queen Alara grew, not as soldier and ruler, but as allies, friends, and witnesses to courage. The desert that had been their crucible became a symbol of endurance. The journey they survived together became legend. Stories of the day Velithan fell and the queen was protected by a single human spread through schools, military academies, and trading stations. Young humans were inspired to act bravely, knowing that one person could make a difference. Alien children were taught that courage and loyalty were virtues that transcended species. Diplomats and soldiers quoted the story in negotiations and strategy discussions. The actions of one human soldier had created a galaxy-wide lesson in bravery. Ethan and Queen Alara eventually returned to her empire, traveling under careful protection. The city of Velethin was in ruins, but it was being rebuilt. She restored her palace, strengthened her forces, and introduced new policies that reflected the lesson learned: trust in choice, respect for courage, and honor for those who act when others flee. In the palace, she created a memorial. It was not grand, but meaningful. A small statue of a human soldier shielding a queen, simple and modest, representing courage, loyalty, and moral choice. It was a reminder to all who saw it: when everyone else runs, a human stands. Ethan stood quietly beside the statue. He did not speak, did not seek recognition, yet he understood the impact of his actions. A single choice, a single moment of courage had changed perceptions, inspired hope, and strengthened alliances. It was more than he had ever imagined, and yet he had done it simply because it was right. Queen Alara placed her hand on his shoulder. "You have done more than survive," she said softly. "You have shown the galaxy the value of humanity. You have saved lives, inspired courage, and reminded all species what it means to stand." Ethan nodded. "I only did what needed to be done." And with that, the galaxy began to remember. Humans were no longer underestimated. Across worlds, civilizations whispered of the day a human soldier shielded an alien queen, stood firm when everyone else fled, and proved that courage, loyalty, and choice could change the course of events. A single human had made a difference, and the story would never be forgotten. As the suns rose over Velethin, painting the palace walls with warm light, Ethan and Queen Alara looked toward the horizon. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and challenges, but one truth remained clear: when others ran, a human stood. And in that standing, the seeds of hope, trust, and inspiration were planted for generations to come.